Hello and welcome. I'm Gloria Prest at Mind in Focus. I'm a hypnotherapist and a psychotherapeutic counselor, and I am here to talk today about work and mental health. It's a presentation which is part of my Essential Psychology for Everyday Life series, and I am now going to share the presentation with you. And I will put it into sleep. My computer is a little bit slow right now. Here we are. Okay, as I said, this is part of my Essential Psychology for Everyday Life series. And the talk today is about work and mental health. Because according to Cancer magazine, up to 20% of women believe that work is a contributing factor to their mental health and their well-being. And women working full-time are 20% more at risk of suffering from anxiety, and the risk of depression is as high as 38%. So the things that people suffer with sometimes is overwhelm, anxiety, exhaustion, imposter syndrome, depression, and sometimes just complete burnout. So we're going to have a look at a few of the facts that might just give an overall view of what mental health is about and how we can be impacted and how work can impact on our mental health. So first of all, there's just a few facts that I want to clarify before we go into talking more specific about work. And fact number one is that the mind is so much more than the sums of the parts. The mind is larger than the brain and is wider than the body. I'm not going to explain all of that in detail here because it would be too long, but because we have an electromagnetic field that around our body, and we have electromagnetic impulses within our brain, there are more things that affect our mind that we might realize. But first of all, the mind is basically made of the brain, the content that the brain has, and the energy that makes it all function. So the brain is the neurons and the glial cells and all the physical bits. But the thing that really matters is what it contains, is the thoughts, the beliefs, the reflexes, the rules that we have in our minds. Some of them we're aware of and we're happy with them. Some of them we're completely unaware of them. They're just at a subconscious level and we don't realize that they are dictating how we react, how we respond to life, and how we feel more or less anxious in situations according to the ideas and the beliefs that we have in our minds. So fact number two, okay, well, because we're talking about mental health, I want to clarify that the majority of the states that are referred as mental illness or mental health issues are not illnesses at all. They are temporary mental dysfunctions that can be resolved and returned to normal with the right support. And the majority are resolved without sometimes the need of medication or even without need of therapy. But some people need that extra help. So temporary mental dysfunctions are not illnesses. Why? Because they're not caused by a virus or a bacteria. They're often the result of the erroneous beliefs or the traumatic experiences that people have had. They do not fit in with a medical model. So anxiety is not like the flu, you don't catch it. So fact number three, as unpleasant and as desirable as these feelings and these conditions are, stress, anxiety, and even depression, they're also natural and good for us at specific times. We have evolved to have them for a reason. It is important that we understand the evolutionary value of these conditions. Stress is there so that you react quickly and get out of danger. Anxiety develops as a system that actually has kept us alive as a species for how many thousands of years, because it's just a system that tells you to stay away from the dangerous situations you've encountered before. Now, of course, with modern day life, the system is not as good as it should be. We haven't adapted yet to the modern life. Our brain still has the ancient system, which worked very well and we actually need. But it's important to know that this in some cases is perfectly normal and desirable. And even depression has got a reason for being there. Depression is believed to have evolved to sort of feel low in energy and not wanting to do much, because it might be that when there's been an injury, then the body needs to conserve all the energy to repair the body, to heal the injury, rather than to be going out doing activities or going hunting or whatever it is. So they all have an evolutionary value. They only become a problem when the situation that you find yourself does not warrant the reaction or the presence of these conditions, or they remain for much longer. It's only when people get stuck that these things are a problem. Now, this is another fact number 4, which is when a mental state becomes prolonged or chronic, it is often confused as it being a personality trait of the person suffering from it. Mental states are not fixed personality traits. For example, you can't say that he or she is an anxious person. It is a person with anxiety. The person will remain, the anxiety will go with the right help or just naturally by itself. So if somebody believes that their condition is part of their identity, recovery becomes much harder because the subconscious doesn't want to let go of something that is part of your own identity. It is important for recovery to separate that issue that you have, that condition that you may have, from your own identity. Fact number 5, and this is important because normally what people would do if they're having problems with severe stress, with anxiety, and with depression, is they would go to the GP. And what the GP normally will do is, in some cases, if people are lucky, they will be referred to therapists, to talking therapy. But often what they're given is psychiatric medication, antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication. Now, there's been a lot of research showing that psychiatric medication is estimated to be needed only by 30% of the people who take it. Some people actually do need it, and that might be you, someone you know. Some people really do need it and benefit from it. But that's 30% of the people who actually receive it. The other 70% would be so much better having a different kind of therapy that doesn't include any drug treatment, and actually goes to the root of the problem and resolves it without creating the nasty side effects that some of these drugs have. Now, another important fact, and this is very, very, very important, anyone taking psychiatric medication needs to know that the prescription or the withdrawal of any psychiatric medication needs to be carefully managed by an expert medical practitioner, by a doctor, but preferably a psychiatrist. GPs are a bit hit and miss in the fact that some GPs are very well trained, very well informed, and they have an understanding of psychiatric medication. But a lot of them, they do not have such comprehensive understanding and knowledge about it, and they can really mismanage it. And I have seen this firsthand with some of my clients, where their medication has been severely mismanaged and they had serious problems. So then also sometimes people take the medication, they feel really good, they feel much better, and they think, right, I don't need it, and then stop it. Right. The sudden and unmanaged cessation of psychiatric drugs can have very serious withdrawal symptoms. So doesn't mean that they might die of it, but they will have a really, really hard time with those symptoms. And what tends to happen is that these withdrawal effects are often confused with the worsening of the condition that they went to the doctor for in the first place. And then what happens is the medication is more likely to be prescribed again with the dosage probably increased, or just a new medication which is probably as strong, when in fact it was just the cold turkey from suddenly stopping the medication. It has to be a gradual, managed sort of withdrawal from any psychiatric medication, and hopefully sort of supervised by a psychiatrist or a very competent doctor. Right. So where does the problem start? If you know someone who's developed a mental health issue, or you are in very stressful state and you think you're developing one, how does it start? Normally, the process is that it will start with stress. When you are in a challenging situation that you believe that the demands of the situation are higher than the capacity that you have to meet them, this is it can be a real issue, a real thing, a real situation, or it could be an imaginary one. It could be a belief. But if you believe you don't have what you need to deal with the situation, you would be under stress. And the stress is what gives you that get out of the situation sort of kick, which is where we'll develop quickly into the stress response, which is the fight, flight, fight, or play dead. Normally, this is the flight or fight sort of response that you probably heard about, and I'll talk more extensively when I talk about anxiety in another presentation. So once you have this event or a series of events, then the anxiety sets in, which is the fear just by the anticipation of being in the same situation again. So you start thinking, oh my God, this is going to happen again. What if this happens again? And then you start getting anxious. And when you have anxiety, you are occupying a lot of your brain power in worrying rather than in doing what it is that you want to do or you need to do. So if you have a long period of anxiety, prolonged stress, and anxiety decreases the function of your mind, the function of the brain, which creates more stress and anxiety. It's like this vicious circle, and eventually exhaustion and self-doubt and self-criticism will lead you to depression. So that's where the main and to burnout. So that's normally the route the things take. So this is why, and some basic understanding of how the mind works, it might help to avoid being stuck in one of those mental states and keep you sanity in spite of work and home challenges. So I'm going to talk about anxiety, which is one of the roots to other issues, and how you respond to the situation. So this is your anxiety thermometer, barometer, whatever you want to take, but this the gadget that measures your anxiety. Just imagine that you have this gadget. So it's just to illustrate. So if we look into this part with the blue and the green part of it, this is the state where you are calm and rest at ease, and it could be really lovely. And this is mediated by one of the two. There are mainly two parallel nervous systems that operate within your body, and they're all part of the vagus nerve. If you are in this part, you are operating on the parasympathetic nervous system, and it means that you're calm and at rest, that all your functions are working, your immune system is working, your digestion is working, the body is doing the repairs it needs to do to any damaged tissue or whatever it is it needs to be doing, and you are functioning with your conscious awareness logically. If you operate on this, you start worrying and you develop anxiety and flu or panic. Then this, because it's about the response to danger, you are in the sympathetic nervous system. So it's two parallel nervous systems, and you can either be on one or the other. You cannot be on both at once. So you can figure out, when you learn about it, whereabouts you are and do something. You find yourself in this and there is no real danger, there is no need for you to be in this, what can you do to get back onto this side of things, to switch from this system to this system, which is the healthy one? So just imagine that you are here and you're happy and unconcerned and quite la la la, everything is great, and then you just something happens, you just back to neutral and start looking at something might not be quite right, and you start getting worried, and already you are taking your mind of whatever task you might have been doing because you're thinking what's not right or what's something is not quite right, and begin to look at begin to be hyper vigilant. Those happen. Then you might be full-blown anxiety, or this happened before, and you start catastrophizing. What if this happens? What if that? And if things go really pear-shaped and go bad, then you can go into a full panic attack. So it could be warranted, and you need this to get out of danger. But if there is no need, it is just in your imagination, because your mind responds the same, exactly the same. The vagus nerve, sorry, will trigger this response, whether it's a real situation or an imaginary one. So make sure that if you're responding in this way, it's because you need to. But if there's an imaginary situation, you don't need to respond that way. And before you get that, you have ways of controlling it so that you go back into this bit here. So I hope that helps a bit. So according to which state you're at, different parts of the brain are engaged. This is when you're normal and relaxed, and your frontal lobes and your cortex is involved, so you have rational thinking and consciousness, whatever. When you start working with this part, which is the anxious part, and the sort of looking for danger, this part starts being disengaged. When you are in this, which is full blown panic, get out of the way, run fast or kick hard, then this part is gone. So you cannot have rational thinking. You don't have, none of this is under your control. This is an automatic response, and you are not in control of it. So once you get to this point, you have to wait for it to subside and then go back to normal. Most animals, we all have this system. Most animals that have through really bad situation, really stressful situation, are very good at, from being here to just as soon as the danger goes, then they restore back to here, or the equivalent in their brain of what would be here. But we, with this here sometimes, and the over worrying, sometimes we just get ourselves stuck. What if, right? So basically, according to how you're feeling, you have to gauge which part of your nervous system is working. And if you're on this one, this bit here, the last three, is usually the sympathetic, which is the danger seeking and getting out of danger. And if you are here, is the rest and restore, the calm, the digest, whatever. So if you find yourselves in these places, if you're here, you need to wait for it to subside. If you find yourselves here, what can you do if there is no real danger? What can you do to get yourselves back into level 1 or level 2? Ideally level 1, but if you're at work, you need level 2, not level 1. So this is a very, very brief explanation, but this is important to understand. You need to restore yourself to be into a calm state of mind. Right. So now this, one thing that I should have mentioned perhaps at the beginning, but is that mental health will affect everybody. Everybody will suffer at some point in their life with a degree of anxiety or overwhelm or lower depression. And this is part of the human experience. Only when people get stuck that is a problem. I think I might have mentioned it anyway. So when people go into work, some people may have other issues of their own that come from their experience, from their life, from home, and they already come more vulnerable to work. And then, of course, things are going to have more of an effect. But some people might not have any issue at all, and they might have, so they'll have more resilience and more ability to cope with whatever things happen at work. But if the things that happen at work are severe enough, they will be affected, nevertheless, whether they've had a predisposition of it towards it or not. So what are the contributing factors for poor mental health at work? So from my experience with my clients and what I've observed in my own life when I worked in previous settings, and from obviously all the study and the research that goes in the psychology area, then one of the main things is the workload. And the workload is possibly that people are putting unreasonable demands on you. But when I've explored it with some of my clients, one or two of my clients actually, it happens, yes, there were unreasonable demands, but they were the ones that were putting the unreasonable demands on themselves. They were assuming that other people were expecting a level of service or a level of work, which in fact was almost humanly impossible to achieve. But it wasn't directly asked from them. They were assuming that that's what was asked. And there's a lot of confusion. People who are very driven and who are perhaps perfectionists and expect so much of themselves, they tend to forget that that they are human and they have limitations. So when you don't respect your own boundaries and your own limits of your capability and your health, then you're causing yourself a real issue. Of course, the other things that I've come across is instances of bullying, of harassment, or discrimination in all the forms. All of them have a serious effect on self-confidence, lack of self-belief, self-doubt, self-criticism. It just has an effect. If you see it clearly for what it is, it's very hard and it's difficult, but it's not as damaging if this is quite subtle and it seeps into your mind without you realizing it. But it's very, they're very difficult issues to deal with. Having conflict with colleagues. Conflict with colleagues can create a lot of discomfort and a lot of tension at work and create a really bad environment. But a lot of the times it's just a question of misunderstandings of what you believe something means for you. It means something different for the other person. It's a lot of cross communication and miscommunication, and if those issues are resolved, normally the situation improves. However, if you're dealing at work with someone who has a narcissistic personality, whether it's a boss or a colleague, then that is a completely different matter. Because they have a serious detrimental effect on the people around them, on the well-being of the people around them. They tend to really very subtly, sometimes very overtly, but often very, very subtly chip away at the person's self-belief, at their own self-concept, at the trust in themselves. And they're very good at gaslighting, at twisting things, at presenting things in a way that show the person in a really bad light. Because people with narcissistic personalities don't have empathy, or they have empathy only to use it. So they know how it works, the empathy, but they can figure that one out to know where it hurts and how to use it. Like, torturers, people who torture people, they know where it hurts. They have empathy enough to know where it hurts, and they don't care. They just do it. So narcissistic personalities, I'm not saying that they're torturers, but they have that thing that they might use it to their advantage, because as far as they're concerned, the world, and that includes you if you're working with them, only exists in function of fulfilling their needs. And if they need to be the best, and they need to be the top, and they'll do whatever they need to do to achieve that. So as long as you know that if that is the case, it is nothing to do with you or with your work or what you're doing. Nothing you do will ever be enough or good for them, and you can't shake them out of it. So just be aware of that. And if you have someone like that working with you, just learn all you need about narcissism, because it might help you to understanding and protect yourself from it. The other problems, obviously, that cause tension and stress is managing work with the caring responsibilities of looking after young children or even teenagers and looking after elderly parents. And many people who are in my sort of age bracket will be caught between the two, so that we have still young people that we need to keep an eye on. Mine are now grown up, so it's not so bad, but people who still have teenagers or young kids, and they also have to manage the care of their elderly parents or parents-in-law. So that's a cause of stress. For some people, perhaps not so much now, because as I'm recording this, we're still coming out of the lockdown from the COVID-19 in 2020. So for some people, now that's resolved because they don't need to commute. They are working from home, or they're not working, they're in furlough, hopefully. They'll work back to work, because the effect of worrying about whether you're going to have a job is also a detrimental factor for your well-being. So the commute for some people is bad, or was bad, because it was adding at least 1 or 2 or more hours to the working day without actually being paid for those hours, and is the expense, the crowded conditions, the exhaustion of traveling. But some people actually enjoyed it because maybe they could read the paper in the train, or they were happily in their bubble driving to work in their car without being bothered. One important one that often is not mentioned is boredom. Boredom is bad for you. And it's not just because you're bored, it's because it has a bad effect on your mental health. There was a really clever study that they did in the States some years ago where they measured the effects of stress at work on the physical well-being of people. And what they did is they had a large number of people of all different professions, very stressful ones and the very low stress levels. And they followed people for a number of years just to see what effects the stress had on their health. What they found, which was surprising for them, was the stress levels and the conditions created by the stress was not related to the demands of the job. So highly demanding jobs like air traffic controllers or neurosurgeons or whatever, they didn't have those side effects if they had the skills and the level of functioning that was matched with the job. If they had those skills and there was a match between their skills and the demands of the job, there was no stress, and therefore there were no physical conditions later on. But the people who were at the other end, the people who had very low level of demands on the job and they had much higher skills and level of functioning in their mind, this gap was causing the same stress as people who were in highly demanding jobs and did not have the skills. So the stress is caused not by the demands of the job, but whether you are matched with those. So when you're looking for work, or when you are thinking of what you want to do, whatever, just think about it. Sometimes you think, if I have an easy time and I don't have a lot of demands, then I'm going to be fine. I'm not going to be stressed. You're going to be stressed because your brain demands a level of activity and excitement and exploration that is natural for the mind. And if you don't provide that, if you don't feed your mind with that, then there will be stress, and you will have the same physical conditions later on in life. Another conflict that causes a lot of problems that I've come across with a couple of my clients is ethical conflict. I had a couple of clients who were working, one directly with a client for their company, who he found really difficult to work for, because what they were doing, it wasn't his own company, but what this other company were doing was what he believed to be unethical and not very good, and he had great difficulties with that, so he was under a lot of stress. I think in the end he stopped the contract. And another person who was working for a marketing company, and then the marketing company tendered the contract to another company, and this company was advertising something to young people who this person really thought was immoral and unethical. So eventually this person changed jobs. So this is something that it needs to be considered, because it's very hard to go against your own moral compass, and if you do, you will cause yourself an awful lot of stress. So what therapies help if you find that you have somehow, for whatever reason, come into having one of these issues? So hypnotherapy is one of the things. Obviously I'm a hypnotherapist, so I know it works very well in many cases, because it goes to the root of the problem, tries to figure it out and set things right from the foundations of it. And then if you combine it with counseling, it works much more effectively. So hypnotherapy and counseling. And then when it comes to counseling, there is a variety of modalities within counseling. You can just explore that and see what you think you might be more interested. Some of them are just a really fantastic tool that is very good for one particular problem, but not all the problems. So you have to find what's right for you. Mindfulness, doing meditation and mindfulness helps everybody, and everyone is one of the main things that you can actually do to keep yourself calm and grounded and avoiding getting into the stressful situations that are not warranted. However, if you have anxiety of a particular kind of anxiety, you need to figure out what kind of mindfulness you can do, because some of the mindfulness practices might not be adequate for certain kinds of anxiety. Then there's the emotional freedom technique or therapy, which is very effective, again, with anxiety and other disorders. That is just very easy. It's a tool that you can learn and use yourself without the need to go into a therapist once you've learned it with a therapist, because it taps into the meridian points that they use in acupuncture, and is quite a fast release. And then is this new therapy that's coming along. It's very exciting, and it's quite new. It's about 4 years until it's come on, which is called the energy alignment method. And this is quite a comprehensive method, quite a, it's something that actually integrates together Eastern medicine, Chinese medicine, with science, with, real neuroscience, science research, with quantum physics, and the latest thing is known about the heart. And the heart, there is something called the HeartMath Institute. So it's real concrete science with ancient philosophies and ancient practices of Chinese medicine put together, working with the energy of the whole body, so working with quantum physics. So you can just explore that, going to Google it, find out, and see whether that's something that you might be interested in. It's not something that I practice quite yet, though I am in the process of acquiring the qualifications. And so other than going to therapists, what can do yourself? So if you have a problem, talk to someone you trust. Recharge your batteries by doing relaxing activities. Ground yourself. When you say grounded yourself, it sounds like, something hippish or something, airy-fairy. Grounding yourself is really good. It's just coming down from your head and being down on the ground, on your body, in the here and the now. And this is what mindfulness helps you to do, because that restores the balance in your nervous system. Okay, live in the moment. Stop thinking what if this, what if that, because lots of people, they're not in the moment. They either live in the past. If I only had done this, if I only had done that, I'm such a bad thing because of that. That's depression. Or looking to the future. What if this happens? What if that happens? And catastrophize. But if they're living in the moment, then they would be fine, because the moment usually is a moment where nothing bad is happening. So just live in the moment. Do physical exercise. I cannot stress enough how important physical exercise it is. It has all sorts of benefits, but for your mind, it's just absolutely necessary. Now, you can do breathing exercises, and again, it's too long to go into the specifics of the breathing exercises, but breathing in deeply, in through your nose and through your belly, and expressing them. That is something that we naturally do when people are stressed. If you observe people sometimes in waiting rooms, in hospitals, whatever, they often do this. That's just a natural response our body has to try and regulate the nervous system. Right, mindfulness practices, as I have spoken about before, and eat well. Sorry, I've just spelled eat well, but it means eat well and look after your gut, because your gut is directly linked to your brain. And last, sorry, but not least, sleep well. Lack of sleep is a major contributing factor to almost all mental health conditions. When you're asleep, you think you're doing nothing. Your brain is working intensively. Your mind is still working, your energy is still working, and you are repairing, restoring, and converting all the short-term memories you've acquired during the day into long-term memories. If you have a lack of sleep, there are many things that are not going to go right. You cannot function well, thinking, reasoning, exploring, anything that you need to concentrate on and to use your mind does not work very well if you have lack of sleep. So, and then my final warning is, right, we need to understand that being mentally healthy is completely different from being happy. It is not about being constantly happy. is about having the mental resources that you need and the resilience that you need to cope with the challenges that life throws at you in a balanced way. So I hope this has explained a few things that you might find useful. And finally, if you want to have more information, please feel free to contact me. My contact details are there. I'm Gloria Prest, and you can either contact me by email, or you can phone me, or just look at my website and you can book a 30-minute phone consultation. I'm very happy to talk to people without having them having to commit to a paying session, because it's important that we get to know whether I am the right person for you if you need help, or whether you are the right client for me, whether I feel that I am the person that I can help you. So we need to make sure that we are a good match, and therefore that's why I offer this free phone consultation. So I hope that what I've explained is of use. My intention is always to give something of value, but there you are. You are the one that can figure that one out, and I hope that something of what I've explained was helpful to you. And thank you for listening.